Episode 73 of the Habs Culture Podcast. My name is Justin Schwartz, alongside my good friend Liam Baum, as per usual. And Liam, today is not just an ordinary day, because all of a sudden, February 2nd, 2024, the NHL has flipped on its head completely, since the last time we spoke at least. February 1st was the All-Star Draft, the first time that they've done that in 10 years. Definitely interesting. And then less than 24 hours later, or maybe 12 hours later even, Sean Monahan gets traded to the Winnipeg Jets. We'll talk about the details soon. But if we back up even a few days, right before the All-Star game, the biggest trade bait, or the biggest guy on the board, Elias Lindholm, is traded to another Canadian team in Calgary, all the way to Vancouver. So there's movement there. And then fast forward back to February 2nd, Todd McLellan of the LA Kings is fired. So there's just been a lot going on in this past week, not even 3 days, 4 days. A lot to dissect, a lot to talk about. So definitely excited to be here today. And Liam, before I throw it on to you, I hope you agree, but I'm pretty sure that this is what NHL fans, this is what hockey fans get excited about. And the NHL as a whole doesn't do an amazing job at marketing their product, but it's events like these, it's trades like these, it's firings or hirings like these that really bring everyone together. So how are you feeling February 2nd, 2024, right at the All-Star break?
Yeah, I mean, it was supposed to be a break from the NHL, but turns out it's some of the most exciting days of the year so far, leading up to the trade deadline and all this news that came out in the past day and a couple days before that. So I think we should get right into the biggest news concerning the Canadians, and that is Sean Monahan getting traded to the Winnipeg Jets. So you have the details in front of you?
I do. So Sean Monahan is traded to the Winnipeg Jets. So two Canadian teams trading with one another. In return, the Canadians receive a 2024 first round pick. So we can probably assume that this is going to be a back end of the first round, considering that Winnipeg has had a really, really good season and is probably going to try and make some sort of, run for the cup here. And as well, they receive, or I guess conditionally receive, a third round pick in 2027. Now, the condition attached to the 2027 third round pick is if the Winnipeg Jets win the Stanley Cup this season. So not saying it's not going to happen, but a lot of things need to fall in place for the Canadians to receive this third round pick in 2027. So At this point in time, I think that we can pretty much chalk it up to Sean Monahan for a 2024 first round pick. Liam, your thoughts on this trade? Is it more than you expected? Is it less than you expected in return? How are we feeling?
Honestly, I mean, right when the trade came out, I was a little disappointed we didn't get any roster player or prospect in return. But if we're going back to 2 years ago, the Canadians acquired Sean Monahan for absolutely nothing. Future considerations. And along with Sean Monahan, the Canadians got a 2025 first round pick in order to acquire his cap. So the Canadians acquired Sean Monahan and a first round pick for nothing. And then today, February 2nd, moved him for another first round pick. So that whole trade tree right now is looking at the Canadians moving future considerations for 2 firsts and a conditional third. So looking at it in that way, in hindsight, the Canadians caught an absolute W here. Maybe they're not too successful with their first round picks, in past history, but hopefully the new scouting team and new drafting team is able to make some good picks and build for the future. I'm honestly pretty happy right now. I don't know about you.
I'm absolutely in the same boat. I agree with you. From an asset management perspective, strictly speaking, I think it was an amazing move. You couldn't have done it any better, because when you have a guy like that who's, I'll say, overperforming in a sense, you need to get him off your team near the trade deadline and acquire as much in return. Now, could Kent Hughes and his management team have maybe gone to another team and acquired a roster player? Potentially. But I'll tell you a couple notes from today's press conference with Kent Hughes. The first thing is that Kent Hughes was interested in potentially acquiring a roster player for this team. Actually, scratch that. That's not true. Not a roster player. He was interested in acquiring a prospect, an NHL prospect. Now, whether this meant from the Winnipeg Jets or another team, whether it meant Rutger McGroarty, whether it meant Brad Lambert, he was interested in doing so. Apparently, none of these teams were willing to part ways with any of their prospects. That's the first thing. The second thing is that I think that he's really, and from what it seemed like, is that he's very, very happy with his return. So asset management perspective, I think it's great. Now, from a personal opinion standpoint, and I want to hear what you have to say about this, Liam, I personally would have preferred a roster player. I would have preferred a guy like Capo Caco. I would have preferred, I'm trying to think of other guys that maybe are underperforming that could use a change of environment or change of scenery. But nonetheless, the reason I say that is because I think that the Habs are in the area, or they're in the situation where far from win now, and they're still in a tank. But I think that they're transitioning out of the bottom feeders of the league, and they're trying to get to that point where they can be somewhat competitive. And you want guys that can play games now. And looking back to last year or 2 years ago, when the Habs drafted Uri Slavkovsky and Philip Messar, who people are very, very excited about, but a lot of people are still, thinking about the fact that they didn't take Brad Lambert. I think it speaks volume in the sense that it would be nice to get someone that can play games now and not just speculate about what could have been or what it can be. So I want to hear what you have to say about that.
Yeah, I agree with you there. We're further along in the rebuild where, we're not at the beginning. We're not trying to build up we're always trying to build up a prospect pool, but we're not at that point where we're just trying to acquire all these younger guys that we're going to have to wait 3-4 years on. So I agree with you there. Getting a guy who's more established, more NHL ready, or closer to NHL ready, so to say, would have been more beneficial. Since if we're comparing it to the Elias Lindholm trade that got back not only a roster player in Kuzmenko, but two prospects who are definitely further along and closer to NHL ready in their development. So, a little bit disappointing there, but it's harder to compare Monahan, who's having a very great season, compared to Lindholm, who's having not so much of a good season. So it's hard to compare their values, even though Monahan has more points. But yeah, I personally would have liked to see a roster player, but honestly, I think we made the right move. We talked about it a lot in the past. If that package came, if the trade came in, or the trade call came in and we were getting offered a first, you got to take it for a guy that you got for nothing.
No, you're absolutely right. Again, asset management standpoint, you get 10 out of 10. Now, preference standpoint, that's a different story, right? And especially from fans who are very eager to see wins and players who can step onto the ice at this point in time. Because right now, I think we can both agree that, look, I think Capo Caco, and I'm just using him as an example because I think his name has floated around the league a lot in recent days, especially around trade deadline. But in my opinion, at least, and I want to hear what you have to say again, he's a player that, yes, has underperformed, yes, hasn't lived up to the hype as a second overall pick, and yes, hasn't produced in the way that the New York Rangers have expected him to produce. But he's a young player who, in my opinion, deserves another chance in a different environment, under a new management team, under a new coaching staff, to get his legs under him. Yeah. And I'm not saying that Montreal is the perfect destination for that, but I will say that you have a lot of leverage in these conversations when you're acquiring a guy who's underperforming and you're selling a guy who's overperforming. And we heard a lot about the fact that the Canadians don't really have a great relationship with the Habs, with the Rangers management team and Chris Drury. But nonetheless, you got to think that there's other teams that are willing to take a shot on Capo Caco and try and transform his game, and then potentially give him a bridge deal as an RFA, right?
Yeah, I mean, as a second overall pick in his, fourth year right now, he definitely deserves to be playing more than 12 minutes a night right now. So maybe Montreal's not the best spot for him, but I think he'd definitely get the opportunity in the top six and be able to showcase more of his skills, where as on the Rangers, who are a very good team and have a very solidified top six, he's not really getting those minutes, and he's not able to play there. But just changing the topic a little, or just going back to the Sean Monahan trade, the good thing for the Canadians here is that they didn't have to retain any of Sean Monahan's salary, which means that they are still able to retain one more player's salary if they make a trade, because we're currently um, keeping the salary, or keeping 50% of Jeff Petry's salary and Joel Edmondson. So the rule is you can hold 3 salaries, or retain 3 salaries, and that still leaves room if we want to trade away another guy such as David Savard or Jake Allen. So pleased to see that, and I guess maybe that's why the return was a little bit lower than it was, but it's a positive nonetheless.
No, absolutely. That's a great point you bring up. And even on that point, during his press conference, Kent Hughes mentioned that was a big thing for him. And on top of that, someone asked him, well, if was not retaining cap one of the biggest things for you? And he said it was very situational. It was dependent on the offer, but we thought that, being able to give him up without having to retain any salary was obviously valuable in this case. And on top of that, in the press conference, I know I keep referring back to that, but you brought up David Savard, and it was asked, well, apparently David Savard was looking forward to conversations with Kent Hughes about his future and looking maybe to accommodate a potential trade at some point in time, or, look towards his future as an NHL player. And Kent Hughes said, look, would we trade David Savard? Yes, but are we actively looking right now? Are we actively looking to move him? No. So interesting there, considering, you would think an upcoming UFA, 30-plus-year-old player who logs big minutes on the D-core, they're not actively shopping him. Maybe he's throwing a smokescreen out there. Maybe he has something in the works. We have no idea. But yeah, absolutely. Definitely a possibility to retain on either a Savard contract, a Jake Allen contract, or if you want to get spicy and trade Josh Anderson or Brendan Gallagher, if any teams are willing to take them, that's also a segue for a different opportunity.
It's a possibility. And if we want to look at it quickly, Sean Monahan was said by Rick Bowness that he's probably going to be starting on a line with Nick Ehlers and Cole Perfetti. So that would be their second line. And most likely would get some power play 2 time, I'd assume, and then some PK time. So definitely a good pickup for Winnipeg. Maybe all Habs fans have to be a bit of a Winnipeg Jets fan here so we can get that 3rd round pick. But nonetheless, Winnipeg Jets adding a solid player there.
Or we hope that they drop off drastically and get a better first round pick this year. So it's one,
if they don't make the playoffs.
Yeah, I guess it's one or the other. But yeah, absolutely. Look, I think, like we said, asset management perspective, great move. Definitely leave some question marks, because Kent Hughes was also asked about, the state of his team right now. And someone asked him, well, who's going to have to step up in his absence, right? Because you didn't require any players in return. So the Habs have been struggling immensely with the fact that, Kirby Dach is down with an injury, Alex Newhook's down with an injury, Christian Dvorak's down with an injury. Now, all of a sudden, you just took away a player from that roster. You already had Lucas Condotta up with the team, who was sent back down. You had Joshua at one point sent back down. I mean, there's obviously a question mark. And he said, every player is going to have to step up. Everyone's going to have to play a part for the last 30 games of the season. So definitely will be interesting down the stretch. Now, let's talk about another trade, because I want to hear your opinions on this one. Before the Monahan trade, I don't remember if it was either Tuesday or Monday. I don't remember exactly. But nonetheless, February 1st. Oh, no, this was written February 1st. It did happen yesterday, didn't it?
It was yesterday or 2 days ago. I can't remember. Anyways.
Doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
But Elias Lindholm from the Calgary Flames was sent over to the Vancouver Canucks by the Calgary Flames for Andrei Kuzmenko on Wednesday. Now, the Calgary also received Vancouver's first-round pick and conditional 4th-round selection in the 2024 NHL draft, and defenseman prospects Hunter Brustevich and Johnny Germo. So, from what I understand, Hunter Brustevich is a former third-round pick, having an amazing season in the OHL right now. I don't know too much about Johnny Germo. Andrei Kuzmenko is a former 70-plus point scorer last year with the Vancouver Canucks, obviously struggling under Rick Tocchet this year. But Liam, initial thoughts, reactions to this, probably one of the bigger trades that we'll see in this calendar year.
Right off the bat, I mean, Vancouver's getting the best player in this trade, so a lot of people see that as Calgary losing. But personally, I see Calgary winning this trade, just because Andrei Kuzmenko had 39 goals last year when he was playing in a relevant spot on the lineup. This year he's had basically no playing time, was scratched a lot, just didn't have the chance under Rick Tocchet, didn't work out. But now he's going to be playing that line one role, power play one role again, and he can easily put up more points than Elias Lindholm. And I'm not saying they play the same style because that's not the case at all. Kuzmenko is more offensive while Lindholm has a more balanced game. But I think Kuzmenko alone is a solid return. And they get a first round pick on top of that. And one of the Bruce Stewitz, I believe, the defenseman, is having an amazing season, over point per game in that would be the OHL, I believe, with Kitchener. Right. He's playing with Messar, actually. But he's looking very promising. And the other defenseman prospect right there, Joni Jurmo, he's having a solid season as well in Europe, I believe. So I think that's a really, really good haul for Calgary. I don't think it's a full rebuild here, but it's definitely a retool. And I think Kuzmenko could spark that offense and bring it back to life a little bit. So I think it's a great trade for Calgary, and Vancouver's adding the player they need to go on that run. So overall, I think it's a pretty solid deal for both teams.
Yeah, I agree. And I think at the end of the day, I know you said that you think Calgary won, and I think I'm for the most part in agreement. But I will say this: if Elias Lindholm can push this team over the edge, and what is considered the edge right now, considering how well Vancouver is playing, who knows? But if that means making it to the Cup final or even winning a Stanley Cup, now maybe I'm pushing the limits here. But if he helps them win a cup, that's a success in their books, right? So I think it's going to be interesting because you don't give up that many assets for a player if you don't plan on re-signing him. So I think that there's obviously going to be not trade discussions. It's going to be contract discussions at some point down the line. I think they want to figure things out with Pettersson before they can move on to Lindholm. But nonetheless, I think that this is a player that's going to be part of their roster going forward, not only for this season, but for the foreseeable future. And I think we can almost chalk it up to a win-win for both sides.
Yeah. The only debate that I brought up to a couple days ago when this trade happened was that Vancouver decided not to bring back Bo Horvat because he was asking for a lot of money. But how much money is Elias Lindholm going to be asking for, and can they afford that with Pettersson looking for a new contract? So I personally want to know from you and the fans, who would you prefer on your team, Bo Horvat or Elias Lindholm? Because personally, I think Bo Horvat is the overall better player. And not only was he producing a lot offensively for the Canucks last season, he was also their captain. So at the end of the day, to me, obviously the Canucks weren't doing well last season and needed a shakeup, but they don't bring back their captain and decide to bring in Elias Lindholm, who's probably going to be asking for a similar AAV, around 6.5 to 7.5 million. So to me, it doesn't make a lot of sense, but the Canucks are doing better. So it's hard to compare seasons.
It's definitely tough to compare seasons. I think I'll play devil's advocate here, and I'll say that I'll take Elias Lindholm on this team. I'll tell you why. Because even though Bo Horvat logged some heavy minutes, he was their captain, played some PK, and was very, very much of a situational player, whether it was winning draws or scoring opportune goals. I think that what they needed was the focus to be a little bit more on JT Miller and Elias Pettersson, and have a guy like Lindholm be that counterpart, be that second driving force on this team. And I'm not saying that Bo Horvat didn't bring that to the table, but I think that sometimes a lot of the focus was taken off of those main guys, and there was less of a focus on like Pettersson and JT Miller. And I think it's opened up a lot for this offense. And I think that with Lindholm being able to be that complementary guy who's going to be, just kind of there to feed the better players on the team, if you will, I think that's going to bode very well for this already gelling Canucks team. So I'm not saying that Bo Horvat really took away from the chemistry that was already built, but I think that Lindholm will actually enhance the chemistry that has already been built this season in Vancouver.
That's a fair take. Should we get a word in from our sponsor?
Yeah, let's do it. So we're going to just hear from our sponsors at DraftKings real quick. Looking for a super offer for Super Bowl 58? DraftKings Sportsbook has you covered. New customers can bet on the big game and turn $5 into $200 instantly in bonus bets. Guys, for the Super Bowl, the 49ers are facing off against the Chiefs. Mahomes versus Brock Purdy, and you have all the opportunities to get in on the big game and place a bet with the DraftKings Sportsbook. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code THPN. New customers can bet $5 to get $200 instantly in bonus bets. Only on DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of Super Bowl 58, with code THPN. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.1800gambler.net. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas, 21 plus age varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. See dkng.com/football for eligibility and deposit restrictions, terms, and responsible gaming resources. Okay, so we're back. We've talked about the two biggest things that have gone on in the past few days here. The Sean Monahan trade, the Elias Lindholm trade, and now we've made it to the point where we're talking about Todd McLellan. I can't say that name right. Todd McLellan or
Yeah, McLellan.
Anyway, McLellan has been relieved of his duties as the head coach of the LA Kings. Now, the LA Kings have been abysmal in their last 10, 15, 20 games. Do we think that this is a Todd McLellan problem, or do we think that this is a LA Kings players not stepping up to the plate problem?
I think this is a desperation problem. Not only do they not have the goalies, it's hard to just go out and acquire a goalie at a time like this, but they just needed a shakeup, and unfortunately, it typically falls on the coach. The Kings started the season first place in the Western Conference about 15, 20 games in, and all of a sudden, they're in a wild card spot, fighting for their lives. Their backs against the wall here because they can't win more than 3 games. And it's a bit ridiculous. They've got the roster. At the start of the season, everyone was saying this is a wagon. This is the team that's going to win the cup. And all of a sudden, Cam Talbot's flaws and age are starting to show. Phoenix Copley obviously out with a torn ACL, out for the season. And now you're running David Riddick as your number 1 goalie. He's been in the AHL for the last year and a half. So lots happening in LA, and unfortunately, the problem falls on Todd McLellan, who I believe is a very solid coach. He's coached winning teams, but it's just unfortunate to see because I personally don't think he was the problem. I don't know about you.
I'm in full agreement there. I think that the management team used Todd McLellan, firing him, as a scapegoat. Because at the end of the day, his record as the LA Kings head coach for 4.5 seasons was 164, 130, and 44. A positive record by 34 games. Now, I'm not saying that firing him was a huge mistake, but the players have to take a little bit more accountability. And to your point, the goalie situation in LA is very, very flawed right now. And I think that was one of our biggest concerns, even though we both had LA doing very, very well this season, which they have so far, despite this little stint. But I think that one of their biggest flaws was the lack of a goalie that can, start 40, 50, even if you wanted to push it 60 games. And you're starting to see Talbot fall, and now you're relying on Rittich, who's a career backup, and no Phoenix Copley, like you mentioned. So these are problems. These are problems. And we've seen it in Edmonton, when there's bad goalie play, it doesn't matter who you have in front of you. So with that being said, I think that yes, Todd McLellan, firing him might have been an okay move, but I think it was more to shake up that room and, have the guys take a little bit more accountability and realize that they need to turn it around sooner rather than later if they want to make a mark in these playoffs.
Yeah, this is the case of the Edmonton Oilers, where you have the team, you're just not producing. And obviously in Edmonton, the coaching change played out pretty well. I don't think it's all on the coach that the team ends up playing well, but it's a shakeup and it happens. And I'm sure the Kings will bounce back. And, maybe this is screaming Jake Allen as the Kings' next target to acquire because they're definitely in need of a goalie, and they definitely have the assets. They definitely got the forward assets and the picks to be able to make that trade. But also adding on to that, Marty St. Louis, surprisingly, hired 2 years ago in 1 week, is now the 10th longest tenured coach in the NHL. 10th longest. That just shows the turnaround of coaches in the NHL, and it's unbelievable. In the last season, there has been 13 coaching changes, and 2 of them were Columbus. So very surprising stat there. But then again, is St. Louis the coach for the future? Is he the guy? So it's looking like that right now. But yeah,
crazy,
we're not, yeah, we're not going to get into that too much. But it's just a crazy stat to bring up that it's been 2 years and he's the 10th longest in the NHL. There's only a handful that have been with their squad for 5 years, and I think Cooper, what's the Colorado coach? Bednar.
Bednar.
Yeah, it's crazy. The turnaround is insane.
I was going to ask you a question while we were on the topic of the LA Kings, and might be a little bit of a weird question. It might be a little bit of a no-brainer, but this was a discussion I was having with a buddy. For your future, going forward, would you rather Pierre-Luc Dubois on his current contract? So just to put that in perspective for you, he signed an 8.5 times 8, so 8 years by $8.5 million, taking up 10.2% of the LA Kings cap space. Or would you rather Kirby Dach at 3.3 and change for the next 3 years? Then he's an RFA where you're going to need to give him a contract. But if you're taking one of those guys for the future of your team, which one are you taking?
I mean, right now, I feel like this is an easy answer, but we're going to see how Dubois plays with this new coach, and maybe he gets some better playing time, different line mates. But right now, I'm choosing Kirby Dach for $3.5 million or whatever it is. Kirby Dach has so much potential. I know we're both Habs fans, and you may say we're biased, but Kirby Dach has shown so much more promise than I think Pierre-Luc Dubois has in the last season. Dubois had a great season in Winnipeg, but he's not the same player anymore, has attitude issues, seems like he always wants to change his team. I know he's locked up there now, but to me, Kirby Dach just seems like an overall stronger player based on the potential he has, and doesn't seem to cause any problems. He's a strong leader, and comparing those 2 contracts, give me the guy who's making less than half. So I'm going Kirby Dach all the way.
I think it's an interesting conversation because obviously on paper and from if we're looking in the here and now, it's obviously a no-brainer. And I think I would take Dach just for the upside. And I think I think his play style is very, very strong, and it advocates for exactly what the Canadians are pushing for down the line. But I do think Dubois will figure it out. I do, because he's 25 years old, and look, the 8.5 does not look too pretty right now. But if he can hit his ceiling at some point throughout his career, then maybe we'll be having different discussions, kind of like that Jeff Skinner deal in a sense.
Yeah.
But the one thing I wanted to say was imagine if the Montreal Canadiens went out and signed Pierre-Luc Dubois this offseason, or traded and signed for this exact contract, and he was playing this way in Montreal. And not only did we now have Josh Anderson and Brendan Gallagher's contracts to worry about for the next 3 years, but we would have had an $8.5 million contract in Pierre-Luc Dubois for the next 8 years. Would that set back this rebuild? Because I think it would.
It'd be like a Drew Wayne situation all over again. Although Drew Wayne was making less. So, I mean, maybe at the time it was more comparable because the cap was lower. But besides that, yeah, I don't think it would bode well with any Canadiens fans. And I'm sure the management would be getting ripped on a lot as well. So, in hindsight, we're pretty happy we didn't get Dubois, even though everyone was screaming to sign him. So I guess we got lucky there. We dodged a bullet for sure.
Interesting conversations, because I think that if we were looking at this, in June, maybe even a little bit later when Pierre-Luc Dubois was traded, a lot of Habs fans, and including myself, probably would have liked Pierre-Luc Dubois on their team, on the Montreal Canadiens. And now maybe not at the cost of $8.5 million, but in some capacity. And we knew that he was going to get paid a big amount, but we didn't know that it would be 8.5. But We'll leave it at that. 30 games and change to go. We'll see how the LA Kings and Pierre-Luc Dubois finish. Did you want to talk a little bit about the announcements that were made during All-Star Weekend regarding the NHLers back in the Olympics for 2026, Liam?
Yeah, let's do it. So, announced today, another big announcement. The NHLers were finally allowed, or are now allowed, to compete in the 2026 Olympics as well as the 2030 Olympics, which is huge. Absolutely huge, because we're finally going to get to see best on best talent play against each other once again. It hasn't been this way since 2016, 2016 when it was the World Cup, and 2014 were the Olympics, the last Olympics that the NHLers competed in. So it's going to be really exciting. And Justin and I whipped up a couple potential rosters for Team Canada and Team USA. So should we go over that real quick?
Well, before you get into it, I have a question for you. And this is without talking about the lineups right here. Surface stats, what we know without the lineups, based on who you know as who's a US-born player, based on who you know as a Canadian-born player. Which side are you taking?
As a Canadian, I got to be Team Canada. And even if I'm looking at rosters, I'm going Team Canada. I know there's question marks, and we'll get into it, but when you got the best 4 out of the 5 players in the world on one roster, doesn't seem like you can lose. Your thoughts?
I mean, I'm looking at what we whipped up here, and the truth is that I have to agree. I think I'd take Canada in a 7-game series against the US.
It's going to be tight. It's going to be tight.
McDavid, McKinnon, Crosby, Marner,
Bedard in 2 years. That's 2 years of development.
But you can't deny the US's depth. You can't.
No. Let's get into it. So, first for Team Canada, on line 1, we got Zach Hyman with his fellow line mate Connor McDavid and Mitch Marner. On the second line, we got the Nova Scotia boys. I believe it's Nova Scotia. Nathan McKinnon and Sidney Crosby, along with the superstar Connor Bedard. Then bringing in some vet presence on the third line with Brad Marchand, Steven Stamkos, and adding his fellow teammate in Braden Point. And then on the fourth line, we got a shutdown line. Had to add him in. We got Mark Stone, our boy Nick Suzuki, and Sam Reinhart. What do you think about that O-core?
I mean, those first 3 lines are not something to mess with. I mean, like you mentioned, having McDavid, McKinnon, Crosby, Bedard, Marner. I mean, I'll leave out Hyman just because I think he's a great complementary piece to McDavid. He's kind of like McDavid's Robin. But, or I guess that's Draisaitl. But this season, I mean, with the way that Hyman's playing. But, yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's a team that knows how to win. You got a lot of winners on that team. I mean, McDavid hasn't won yet, and I guess Marner hasn't won yet. But Crosby and McKinnon and Marchand and Stamkos and Point, these are guys that know how to win when it counts. So I really, really like that. There's a lot of I have a lot of confidence in that core.
And if one of these guys get injured, there's no shortage of substitutes here, as we got some grit in Travis Konechny. We got Mark Scheifele, Robert Thomas, Nugent Hopkins, Bo Horvat, and Carter Verhaeghe, all possible replacements. Do you think Nick Suzuki can make this team?
I do.
In 2 years, remember.
I do. Now, in what capacity, in what role, how many minutes is he playing? I have no idea. But I do think that he's skilled enough to be on this roster. And I do think that he's shown that his 200-foot game is bodes very, very well for a team that's going to be competing at the international level against the best of the best.
Team Canada is also very much well known for not only picking, or for not picking the top talent, but picking guys who have an overall strong game. So this is why we got Mark Stone, maybe not the most offensive guy, but his defensive game is unreal. And Nick Suzuki can provide that same defensive presence. So I'm in agreement. I think he's got a very strong chance at making this team.
And look, at the end of the day, well, you know what? We'll get there. Well, if you want to list off the defensemen first, really quickly.
Yeah, let's go for the defense here. On the first line, we got Josh Morrissey and Cale Makar. Second D pairing, couple of teammates, Shea Theodore and Alex Pietrangelo. And then on the third line, we got Evan Bouchard and Dougie Hamilton. And a couple subs to mention. Tom Chabot, Devin Taves, Mackenzie Weegar, Morgan Riley. And in 2 years, a more developed Owen Power. So thoughts on that, Decor?
But again, kind of like what you mentioned, right? You got a good mix of two things here. You have a couple offensive defensemen in Makar and Bouchard. And then and a bunch of guys that contribute offensively, but Theodore, Pietrangelo, Dougie Hamilton, and Morrissey, those guys are really you don't mess with those guys defensively.
No.
So I think that's an incredible decor. I think that again bodes very well for what Team Canada has tried to build in the past and is looking to build in the future. But if we, aside from all that, aside from the offense, aside from the defense, there's a lack in nets.
Yeah, that is the shining problem that Canada has had for the last. I mean, I guess we haven't had it in international play because there hasn't been best on best, but since Brodeur, Price, and Luongo have been out the door, even Fleury aging a lot, there hasn't been a Canadian goalie who has come in and been that guy, been that top talent in the league. So we have a lot of goalies on this list.
Liam, before we even look at the list, one goalie to be named the starter of the Canadian Olympic team. Who are you taking right here, right now?
I hate to say it, but I think it's going to be Darcy Kemper.
Ooh.
Just because he's won a cup, maybe not the most consistent play, but looking at this list of goalies, I think he might be the best. And there's a lot of inconsistent goalies here. We're going to list them off. I'll let you go for that. But I think that's Kemper's spot right now.
So we have Darcy Kemper, Tristan Jarry, Logan Thompson, Aiden Hill, Jordan Binnington, Stuart Skinner, and a couple, we'll call them honorable mentions, Samuel Montembeault, Montreal Canadian, and Devin Levi. Look, I don't know. I don't know. Like you said, it's really a toss-up. Like, I would love to see Montembeault or Levi, in 2 years down the line, be at the point where this would be a no-brainer. But if I had to pick right now, based on the play right now, hate me all you want, I'm going Jordan Binnington.
Oh, man. Again, proven winner.
But that's the thing, is that I think that his ability to win, and if he can stay cool, calm, and composed at some point, down the line,
that's a
he's
tough
proven
ass.
that he can get really hot. He proved that in that cup run. And I think, again, the Team Canada doesn't want to necessarily be conservative, but they don't want to be too outgoing either. And I think that's what they provide. That's what Binnington provides, because he plays with a little bit of flair, but also I think that he's proven to be solid at times. So it's kind of a nice balance there. So That would be my pick at this point in time.
Look, everyone rips on Canada lacking in nets, but if we're comparing Canadian goalies to American goalies, there's not a single one on this American goalie list that has won a Stanley Cup. And there's 4, 5 have won Stanley Cups on this Team Canada. Has Jarry won a cup? Maybe as a backup? Probably not. No, I don't think he was there.
No.
So 4 goalies there have won a Stanley Cup on Team Canada. So it shows that they've definitely got the skill. Maybe they're not lacking as much as it may seem. And with that team in front of you, all you need to be is solid. You don't got to be anything spectacular.
Well, see, that's what I was going to say also. That's to me what that kind of reinforces your point about Kemper, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Because if you look at when they won the cup in with Colorado, I think that's what he was. He was playing he was playing behind a very, very good team that allowed a very low amount of shots, which allowed him to be solid. Now he might get 20 shots and he'll let in one goal, but that was good enough to win. So I think that any of these guys can kind of get that job done. Now with international play getting increasingly better and teams getting better, whether it's the US, whether it's Czech, whether it's Sweden or Finland, I mean, they might end up needing a little bit better goaltending, and we'll see down the line if any of those younger guys can emerge as like a front runner. But yeah, I guess your pick for right now is Darcy Kemper. My pick for right now is Binnington. Two interesting options, nonetheless.
Two interesting options, but we'll see in 2 years how this turns out. Let's get into the Team USA roster, and this is a skilled, stacked, and gritty roster. Going to be hard to compete with, and it's going to be really, really exciting to see. But right at the bat, your first line consists of Jason Robertson, Austin Matthews, and Jack Eichel. The second line consists of the two Tkachuk brothers and Jack Hughes, which is going to be a tough line to play against, I'll tell you that. The third line consists of Kyle Connor, Tage Thompson, and Clayton Keller. And the fourth line, Jake Gensel, Dylan Larkin, and we had to throw in Cole Caulfield. I'm going to ask you the same question as before. Do you think a Montreal Canadian, Cole Caulfield, makes this roster?
This time I'll go with no. Because the names that we have in the subs, DeBrincat, Matt Boldy, JT Miller, in a lesser role, I think they're going to go with the more conservative play. And Caulfield is not the greatest 5-on-5 player. So I think that they might prefer a different option. Boldy has been recognized for his skill defensively, and so is JT Miller. Not last season, but a lot more this season. DeBrincat maybe a little bit more of a liability defensively, but I think that he's a little bit more proven than Caulfield is. So it's no shortage of skill for Cole Caulfield. It's more of, if you're going to be playing in a minor role on that third or fourth line, because clearly we see how stacked this team is, I think they'll go with a guy that can maybe bring a little bit more defensively. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah. If I'm going to put a guy on the fourth line, it's probably not going to be Cole Caulfield. It's probably going to be a guy like JT Miller. So unfortunately, he might not be right there yet to play in that top 6, but he'll probably be at the tryouts or maybe named on that camp roster. So we'll see how that plays out. In terms of defense, this is a stacked D-core. They got the point leader in the NHL right now for defenseman, Quinn Hughes, with Charlie McAvoy. Probably the best shutdown defenseman in the league with Jacob Slavin, paired with the offensive juggernaut Adam Fox. And then the third pairing consisting of Zach Werenski and John Carlson. Your thoughts on this D-core?
Definitely solid. I'll take Canada's D-core any day of the week, I'd say. I think that you have a lot of skill there with Quinn Hughes, Adam Fox, and Charlie McAvoy, and a few very good shutdown options in Slavin, Werenski, and John Carlson. I think that there's also a possibility where Luke Hughes, in 2 years down the line, completes the trifecta for this US team. But yeah, I'll take the Canadian D-core over this D-core just in terms of defending ability. But nonetheless, I think it's what are we talking about here? We're talking best on best. So this team has no shortage of skill.
I'm going to play devil's advocate here, and I think I'm going to take the American defenseman core over Canada. I think it's close, and Canada has Cale Makar, but 3 lines deep of top. I mean, I guess it's the same for Canada, but I think Slavin is just very, very underrated, and playing with a guy like Adam Fox, that'll be unreal. And then another amazing two-way defenseman with Charlie McAvoy and Quinn Hughes. It's tough to stop. And I think Canada's right there. But the only guy I'm taking over the Americans D-core in terms of line comparisons is Makar. I think I'd rather Slavin and Fox over Theodore and Pietrangelo, and I'd rather Werenski and Carlson over Bouchard and Hamilton. So it's tight. It's hard to say for sure.
I just think it depends with what you're working with, because at the end of the day, if we're talking about strictly defending, Yes, Slavin is probably one of the better defenders in the league, and McAvoy has emerged as a top 5 defender in the league. But I just think that Theodore, Pietrangelo, Dougie Hamilton, and Morrissey, those 4 guys alone have proven to be some of the better defenders in the league on some of the bigger stages when it comes to the Stanley Cup, like the Stanley Cup stage or the playoff stage. And I think that at the end of the day, the Canadian decor plays with a lot more grit and size than the US decor. And I'm not saying that determines everything, but like I said, when you're playing best on best in important games, I'll take and Vegas proved that model. They proved that the bigger decor with the lanky reach and the physicality component is incredibly important. And I think that's where Canada trumps US in this case.
No, that's a fair take. If we're assuming Patrick Kane isn't on this American roster, and we'll assume he's probably going to be retired or going into retirement that season, Team USA only has 2 players who won a Stanley Cup in John Carlson and Jake Gensel did as well. So 3 cups, Eichel, Gensel, and John Carlson, while Canada is absolutely stacked with Stanley Cups. So it's going to come down to who has that experience in the big games and is able to make those big plays in the big moments. And I think Canada definitely has that ability to just show their perseverance and show their experience in those big games. So comparing going into the Team USA goalies, I feel like it's pretty concrete of who's going to be there. We got Connor Hellebuck, Thatcher Demko, and Jake Ottinger. And then the possibility of Jeremy Swayman, but I don't think he'll be able to make it over those 3 guys.
I mean, these 3 goalies are incredible
in
every aspect. If I had to pick one, it's Hellebuck. I've been a huge Hellebuck guy for a while, and I just feel like he's, again, I won't call him a winner because he's never won with Winnipeg, but I'll call him a gamer. I just think he competes so hard. And
I mean, he plays like 70 games a season.
That's what I'm saying, like when you're getting that many starts and even last year Bonus said, and I don't know if he's done it this year yet, but has put him on a few back-to-backs and it kind of saved their season at one point in time. Like it's just that this guy is a true gamer, because I can't call him a winner, but a gamer, and his compete level is through the roof. And I think that that's going to shine through for Team USA.
Let me ask you right now. Let's say Russia's in the Olympics or in this best on best tournament that is also going to be coming up. Are you taking Team USA's 3 goalies of, let's assume it's Hellebuck, Demko, and Ottinger, or are you taking Russia's goalies of Vasilevsky, Shesterkin, and Sorokin?
Oof.
And who would you have as, I think we talked about this one time, but who would you take as Russia's number 1 goalie in 2 years?
Those are 2 great questions, 2 tough questions. If I had to give off the top of my head my answer for the Russian goalie, the Russian starter, I'd go with Elias Sorokin. Now, I think that he's emerged as the top goalie in the league. I think that Shesterkin's performance this year has kind of hindered where he's at as a player, but we know his capabilities, we know his skill, but I still like Sorokin in that case. Now, if you were to give me the option between the USA goalies, the 3 USA goalies, Hellebuck, Demko, Ottinger, and Shesterkin, Vasilevsky, Sorokin, I think I lean Russia here.
It's honestly really hard to say, just because Tampa hasn't been that good this season. But we know what Vasi can do. And then the same case goes with Shesterkin, where he's carried New York. Absolutely carried. But this season, it just hasn't been the same. But then you look at those...
Liam.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry to cut you off, but here's the thing. Is at the beginning of the season, I don't know about you, but I had Sorokin 1 going into the season, Shesterkin 2, followed by Vasilevsky at either 3 or 4. Now, obviously, I think I had Hellebuck 3. And I had Ottinger 5 and Demko out of the top 5. So they're all within the top 5. But if I still stand by my opinion that Sorokin is 1 and Shesterkin is 2, which, yes, this season hasn't been great for Shesterkin, but I still think that he's a top 3 goalie in the league, then I'll take Russia pretty comfortably. But I do think that, the U.S. has there's a case for the U.S. here.
Yeah. We'll come out with more rosters in the future. Maybe some mock Sweden, Finland, and Russia. Maybe there's a Team Europe in there, like the World Cup was like for their for the best on best tournament that will be happening in 2025, I believe. And
in
that
2 cities.
Yeah, in 2 cities, one of them being Montreal, and one of them, the other one being Boston. And this tournament is actually going to replace the All-Star game, I believe. It's going to be, I don't know, is it the full All-Star game or just the skills competition?
Great question. That we'd have to look up that in a little bit more detail.
I believe it's the whole All-Star game. So they're just abolishing the concept of an All-Star game. I think it's been dropping off the last.
Hey, but if that's at the expense of this type of tournament, I'm all in.
Yeah.
Take all my money,
I'd much rather watch Crosby, McKinnon, and McDavid be on a line or be on the same team, same power play.
We took that for granted, though, for sure.
We did. At the time, it was just, imagine seeing, what was the line? Crosby, Marchand, Bergeron, their primes, along with Shea Weber, Duncan Keith, probably like the greatest goalie core ever to play together. So, we were younger. It was hard to appreciate, but after 10 years or 8 years, whatever, it's going to be 10 years in 2026. It's going to be exciting to see finally. And
even Team North America, man. I mean, you look back on that, and you had what? McDavid, Matthews, Eichel, and McKinnon on the same team.
Eichel, wow. just an insane, and the goalies too were absolutely amazing with Gibson, Matt Murray, and Connor Hellebuck. So finally, we get to see some best on best, and it's going to be at the expense of the All-Star game, but we'll finally see it in the Olympics and finally see Connor McDavid in a Team Canada jersey other than a World Junior Tournament. Any other comments about that?
No comments about that. I thought that this would be a good opportunity to transition into our last topic of conversation for the day, which is not particularly exciting, but it's the Montreal Canadiens. It's the upcoming schedule. What do the Canadiens have left in the tank? Are they a bottom 5 team in this league? Are they destined for a top 5 pick? Are they destined for Macklin Celebrini? Do they want the prize or the consolation prize of Ivan Demidov or Caden Lindstrom or one of the defensemen?
Cole Yzerman.
Please no defenseman, though. Please no. Yeah, Cole Yzerman too. So who knows? But the one thing I want to point out, Liam, and it's bothering me. It's bothering me. I'm looking at Daily Faceoff right now.
Don't
Nick Suzuki, Uri Slavkovsky, Cole Caulfield. Fine. Yeah, that's what it's been. Can't complain about that. That's where we want it. Josh Anderson, Jake Evans, Yoel Armia, Tanner Pearson, Mitchell Stevens, Raphael Harvey-Pinard, Michael Pezzetta, Lucas Condotta, Jesse Alonen. What is going on here? And that's what I think the reporter asking Ken Hughes, like, what's the deal here? What are we going to do? Like, I think it's a valid question. Because 30 teams is a lot of games to play with this roster.
Yeah. This reminds me of the COVID roster where Cam Hillis was playing Power Play 1. So, is this a worse roster than last season? I actually would love to compare them. Because at least we had Kirby Dach and we had Sean Monahan. Well, actually, we didn't have Sean Monahan. He was injured. But this is just going to be... It's a repeat of the last 2 seasons. Where
it's brutal.
We start okay, we're about 500, and then it just drops off. And maybe that's not the worst case. We're 6 points out of 4th to last. And once again, we'll say it. It may be painful now. We may be suffering a little bit, but for the future, it's going to pay off. And we're going to keep saying that because we believe in this rebuild and we believe in the team that has had an amazing history and was once every year a playoff team, and it's going to happen again. We just got to suffer through these painful times and hope that we get that prize player in the top 4, top 3.
If we make the right pick, right? So there's still that factor. Just looking at the upcoming games, Liam, Tuesday, February 6th, first game for the Canadiens after the All-Star break is against the Washington Capitals in the nation's capital, followed by a game at home 4 days later against Dallas, the Stars, in Montreal. Then that back-to-back game against St. Louis, Sunday, February 11th in Montreal. Now, keep in mind that because this is Super Bowl weekend, the game against Dallas is at 1 p.m. on Saturday, and the St. Louis game is at 1 p.m. on Sunday. So some matinee hockey there. Liam, Washington, Dallas, St. Louis, and the team the Canadiens have on paper. What is the record for the week of February 5th, 2024?
I'll say we're probably going to lose the first game without Sean Monahan. So we'll lose to Washington there. Not very confident against Dallas, but I'll give us the win against St. Louis. And I'll say,
so you're going 1-2 there?
Yeah, I'll go 1-2. Go ahead.
And do you have, just out of curiosity, is there any game in particular, anything that you're looking forward to watching in these next 3 games?
Nope.
None
No,
of that.
no. Always looking forward to watching the Habs. I'm excited to see what line combos are going to happen. Who's going to get the call up? What's going to happen? Maybe Joshua comes back. I don't know. Where's Elias Anderson? I want to see Elias Anderson in the NHL. And then who's coming in on power play 1? That's it's probably going to be Josh Anderson.
Well, maybe Alex Newhook makes his return very, very
that is true.
soon and takes that spot on power play 1. That would be ideal. That would be a nice little.
It's been 8 weeks since his injury, and he was expected to be out. He was skating, and he was expected to be at 10 to 12. So let's assume he's back in the next week, at worst 2-3.
We'll see. So that could be interesting. Unfortunately, I got 0-3 here. I got 0-3. I can't look at that team on paper. I just don't think that, coming off the All-Star break, why would this team be inspired? Why would they be driven to win? And again, they're going to go out there and, play hockey just like they do every game. But I don't think that down the stretch when 2 of these teams are trying to make the playoffs, and St. Louis clearly has something to prove because they've been playing good hockey before the break. Why would they lose the quote unquote easy games or the trap games to Montreal? So I'm going 0-3 here. Performer of the week, though, I'm going with, you had Yoel Armia last week. I don't know how that worked out.
Couldn't tell you. I don't think he did anything.
Yeah, probably not, because the Canadiens lost 2 of their last 3.
I think we predicted 4 games and they went 1-3.
That's correct, actually. I had the Habs beating Boston, beating Ottawa, beating Boston, beating Ottawa, and then losing to New York. I was completely wrong.
I had losing the first one to Ottawa, so I was right. Losing to Boston, I was right. Then I had them beating Ottawa, which I was wrong, and then losing to the Islanders, which I was wrong as well. But I got the record right. We'll take it.
Yeah, you'll take it. But my performer of the week, if I had to go with someone, I think we're going to see a big week from probably our next trade chip up on the board, Jake Allen. I think he might play well enough to get a win, and maybe scouts are looking on and, are willing to pull the trigger, whether it's LA or whether it's another team. Hey, if LA wants to give over Arthur Kaliev in a trade for Jake Allen, we're all for it.
We'll take it. I'm gonna say another trade chip as well, and I don't think he's been mentioned in our player of the week. Yeah, you could guess.
Not David Savard, right?
It is David Savard. It's David Savard. He's gonna do his patented drive the middle backhand, or make that one move backhand, and he's gonna score maybe 1, maybe a dime, and then we're shipping him out. I don't know what for, but just coming back to the Habs record, anything could happen in the NHL because the Sharks have won 4 of their last 5 with that roster. So
you never know.
Maybe the Habs win 10 of their next 15.
Well, with no expectations, sometimes things change. So
that's a great quote to leave it on. That's a terrific quote.
We'll leave it at that. Yeah, it's crazy. We're more than halfway through the season. I'm looking down the lineup, and you don't, or not lineup. You're looking down the schedule. The Canadians don't have that many games left, so appreciate it while it's still on TV and still while you're still able to watch. But guys, per usual, we're almost at the hour mark. That was a fun discussion. Sean Monahan, Elias Lindholm, All-Star
Todd.
game, Todd McLellan, Olympics. So all fun topics of conversation. Let us know what you guys think. We always appreciate the feedback. And we'll leave it at that for episode 73.
Yep.
So thank you guys so much for listening or watching. And we will see you next week.
Check out the TikTok. It's going crazy. Let's keep it up.
Check out the TikTok. Take care, guys.